really wanted to go. It was the second saddest day of my life, other than, losing Elvis.
On March 14th, 2023, two construction workers renovating Graceland's private bathroom made a discovery that would shatter nearly 5 decades of carefully maintained silence. They were updating plumbing behind the bathroom walls when their sledgehammer broke through what they thought was solid drywall and instead revealed a hidden compartment. Inside that compartment, sealed in a manila envelope and protected by plastic wrapping, was a 4-page handwritten letter that Elvis Presley never intended anyone to find. The envelope was addressed in Elvis's distinctive handwriting to Scylla, his pet name, for Priscilla, and dated July 28, 1977, 19 days before the world lost the king of rock and roll forever. The workers who found the letter had no idea what they were holding. They assumed it was some kind of vintage memorabilia that had been stored and forgotten during one of Graceland's many renovations over the decades. But when the estate manager examined the envelope and recognized the handwriting, everything stopped. The renovation was immediately halted. The workers were asked to sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements, and within hours, a team of forensic document analysts was flying to Memphis to determine whether this letter was authentic or the most elaborate hoax in Elvis Presley history. The authentication process that followed was more thorough than anything typically applied to historical documents. Handwriting analysts compared the letter's script to authenticated Elvis samples spanning his entire adult life. The formation of his letters, the pressure patterns of his pen strokes, the distinctive way he wrote certain words when he was emotionally agitated, every microscopic detail was scrutinized and cross-referenced. Paper specialists analyzed the stationery itself, confirming it matched Elvis's personal letterhead from the 1970s, complete with the Graceland address embossed at the top. Ink composition analysis revealed blue ballpoint ink consistent with pens available in 1977, with aging patterns that matched the claimed date perfectly. But the most compelling piece of authentication came from Priscilla herself. When shown photographs of the letter during the verification process, she immediately recognized not just Elvis's handwriting, but the specific pen he had used. She identified it as a blue ballpoint pen she had given him as a gift years earlier, one with a distinctive silver band around the middle that he had favored for personal correspondence. The pressure patterns on the paper, where Elvis had pressed so hard that the ink almost tore through, matched exactly how he wrote when he was upset or frightened. This wasn't the careful, controlled handwriting of someone composing a casual note. This was the desperate scrawl of a man trying to communicate something urgent while fighting against time. Every expert who examined the letter reached the same conclusion: it was undeniably authentic. Which meant that 19 days before his death, Elvis Presley had written a letter to his former wife that he never sent, hidden it in a location that suggested he was terrified of being discovered, and died before he could retrieve it. But this wasn't a sentimental goodbye or a nostalgic reflection on their relationship. What forensic analysts found when they examined the content made them understand immediately why Elvis had hidden it so carefully, and why the Presley estate moved within hours to suppress it completely. The moment the letter's authenticity was confirmed, a legal battle erupted that revealed just how devastating its contents actually were. The Presley estate filed emergency motions claiming attorney-client privilege, arguing that the letter contained sensitive family information that was never meant for public consumption. They invoked privacy rights, intellectual property protections, and even attempted to claim that the letter was part of sealed estate documentation. But their most telling argument was their insistence that the letter was private family correspondence that would damage Elvis's reputation if released in argument that only makes sense if the letter contains information that contradicts the official story of Elvis's final weeks. Legal experts following the case noted that the estate's response was unprecedented in its speed and comprehensive scope. They weren't just trying to keep the letter private, they were trying to prevent anyone from even discussing its existence. Cease and desist letters were sent to the authentication experts who had examined it. Non-disclosure agreements were demanded from everyone who had seen it. The estate's legal team filed motions asking the court to seal all documentation related to the letter's discovery and authentication. This wasn't standard privacy protection. This was evidence suppression on a scale that suggested the letter's contents posed existential threat to decades of carefully maintained narrative. Because this letter wasn't what anyone expected to find. Elvis hadn't written to Priscilla to express love, regret, or nostalgia about their relationship. He hadn't written to share memories or seek closure for their divorce. Instead, Elvis had written to reveal something that he believed would cost him his life if the wrong people discovered it. The letter contained detailed accusations against named individuals in his inner circle, specific descriptions of financial arrangements he had uncovered, and most shockingly, a timeline for staging his own death that he was asking Priscilla to help him execute. This wasn't a suicide note, it was an escape plan. The location where the letter was discovered told its own story. Elvis had sealed it behind a false panel in his private bathroom, the one place in Graceland where he could be certain of privacy. He had wrapped it in plastic and hidden it in a way that suggested he planned to retrieve it later, but also in a way that would preserve it if something happened to him first. The hiding place wasn't random or convenient. It was strategic, chosen by someone who understood that his private communications were being monitored and that his movements were being watched. When the construction workers broke through that wall on March 14, 2023, they didn't just find a letter. They found evidence that Elvis Presley's death may not have been the tragic accident the world has believed for 46 years. Because the very first line Elvis wrote to Priscilla wasn't an expression of love or a request for reconciliation. It was a cry for help that arrived 46 years too late. Scylla, they're going to kill me, and I need your help to die first. More than 90% of the people watching this video right now still aren't subscribed, and that means most people are missing out on exclusive, untold stories about Elvis Presley you won't find anywhere else. If you don't want to miss the next revelation, now's the time. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this video with one friend. Now let's continue. The words that Elvis wrote to Priscilla in those 4 pages weren't the rambling thoughts of a man losing touch with reality. They were the methodical, detailed observations of someone who had discovered something terrifying and was documenting it with the precision of a man who understood his life depended on getting the facts exactly right. Page 1 began with that devastating opening line to Priscilla. But what followed was even more shocking. Elvis wrote that he had spent weeks secretly investigating his own life, going through documents and contracts when his handlers thought he was sleeping, and what he found had changed everything he thought he understood about the people controlling his world. Elvis told Priscilla that his discovery began when he overheard a conversation between his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, and Dr. George Nicopolis that wasn't meant for his ears. He wrote that he had been pretending to sleep in his bedroom when the two men entered to discuss what they called the Elvis situation. But they weren't talking about his health or his career. They were talking about financial arrangements that would activate upon his death. Elvis described lying perfectly still while the two men discussed insurance policies, estate planning documents, and management contracts that paid significantly higher percentages to his handlers if he died than if he continued living. In his letter, Elvis wrote, "I found the papers, Scylla, the insurance policies, the estate planning documents, the contracts that pay them more when I'm dead than they make keeping me alive. They've been planning this longer than I've been sick." What Elvis had discovered about his medical care was even more devastating. He wrote that Dr. Nicopolis wasn't just overprescribing medication, he was deliberately combining prescriptions in ways designed to create specific psychological and physical effects. Elvis described finding medical notes in Dr. Nick's handwriting that didn't focus on treating his conditions, but on managing patient compliance and maintaining controlled dependency. The medication combinations weren't designed to help Elvis feel better. They were designed to keep him cognitively impaired enough that he couldn't make independent decisions about his own life. Elvis wrote to Priscilla, "Dr. Nick isn't trying to cure me. He's trying to control me. The pills aren't medicine, they're chemical handcuffs. And when I tried to cut back, they told me I was having withdrawal hallucinations." The letter revealed that Elvis had been systematically isolated from anyone who might question his treatment or advocate for his independence. He wrote that his handlers had created what they called protective protocols that prevented him from meeting with family members, friends, or business associates without supervision. Elvis described how phone calls were monitored, mail was screened, and visitors were briefed before they saw him about what topics were too stressful for him to discuss. Anyone who expressed concern about his condition was told he was having paranoid episodes and that contradicting his medical team could trigger dangerous psychological reactions. Elvis wrote, "They won't let me see anyone alone anymore. They say it's for my privacy, but I know it's because they're afraid I'll tell someone what's really happening to me." But the most shocking revelation in Elvis's letter was his detailed plan to escape by staging his own death. He had been secretly reducing his medication intake for weeks, enduring withdrawal symptoms in private to clear his head enough to think and plan. He had identified accounts that his handlers didn't know about, small amounts of money he could access independently. Most importantly, he had contacted someone outside his inner circle, someone he didn't name in the letter, who was willing to help him disappear permanently. Elvis wrote that he had studied how other people had successfully faked their deaths, and he believed he could make it convincing enough that his handlers would stop looking for him. The plan was elaborate and specific. He would stage a medical emergency at Graceland, be declared dead by a complicit medical professional, and then be secretly transported to a location where he could live anonymously until the people trying to control him moved on to other opportunities. Elvis gave Priscilla exact instructions for her role in this plan. She was to publicly grieve appropriately, but privately know that he was alive and safe. He would contact her through predetermined signals once he was established in his new location. Most importantly, she was to never attempt to find him or verify his survival, because any investigation on her part could expose the deception and put both their lives at risk. Elvis wrote, "I need you to arrange everything. Make it look real enough that they stop looking for me. I can't keep being Elvis Presley. It's going to kill me if I stay." The timeline Elvis outlined in his letter was chillingly precise. He planned to execute his fake death in mid-August 1977, specifically during a period when his normal routines would make a medical emergency seem plausible. The most devastating aspect of Elvis's hidden letter isn't what he wrote to Priscilla, it's the fact that she never received it. When forensic analysts examined the envelope's condition and the circumstances of its discovery, they uncovered evidence that Elvis never had the opportunity to send the letter he had risked everything to write. The false panel where it was hidden showed signs of hasty construction, suggesting Elvis had sealed the letter behind the wall with the intention of retrieving it later. But the timing of when that panel was created, cross-referenced with Elvis's death just 19 days later, reveals something chilling. Elvis ran out of time to execute the very escape plan he was asking Priscilla to help him accomplish. What makes this revelation particularly significant is what handwriting experts discovered when they examined the envelope itself. Elvis had written 2 different addresses on it, something that only becomes apparent under forensic analysis using specialized lighting. The first address, written in his normal script, was Priscilla's home in California. But underneath, partially erased and written in the pressed, urgent handwriting that appears throughout the letter, was a Memphis address. This suggests Elvis had changed his plan for delivering the letter, deciding against mailing it directly to Priscilla and instead planning to hand-deliver it to a local intermediary who could get it to her safely. The fact that he felt the need to route his communication through a third party reveals the extent to which Elvis believed his direct contact with the outside world was being controlled and monitored. That belief wasn't paranoid delusion. Throughout the letter, Elvis made references that prove he understood his communications were being intercepted. He wrote to Priscilla about previous attempts to contact her that had been blocked, describing phone calls that had been disconnected and messages that had never reached their intended destination. In one particularly haunting passage, Elvis wrote, "I can't call you directly anymore. They listen to everything. I can't write letters because they go through my mail. I can't even trust the people who drive me places because they report back to the Colonel and Dr. Nick about everywhere I go and everyone I try to see." This wasn't the rambling of someone experiencing drug-induced paranoia. This was the systematic documentation of a surveillance network that had isolated Elvis completely from anyone who might help him break free from the control his handlers had established. Elvis's letter revealed that he had made multiple attempts to reach Priscilla through intermediaries in the weeks leading up to his death, but each attempt had been discovered and blocked. He described trying to get messages to her through Jerry Schilling, one of his oldest friends, only to discover that Jerry had been told Elvis was experiencing paranoid episodes and that any unusual requests should be reported immediately to Elvis's medical team. He wrote about attempting to contact Billy Smith, his cousin, asking him to call Priscilla with a coded message about Elvis's condition. But that attempt was also intercepted, and Billy was subsequently told that Elvis's family was concerned about his mental state and that anyone receiving strange communications from him should contact Dr. Nikopoulos immediately rather than follow through on Elvis's requests. The systematic nature of these blocked communications reveals something that goes far beyond simple medical oversight or family concern. Elvis's handlers had created a comprehensive isolation protocol that prevented him from establishing contact with anyone outside their controlled circle. Every potential ally, every possible escape route, every person who might question what was happening to Elvis had been neutralized through a combination of misinformation, legal threats, and financial incentives. Elvis had become a prisoner in his own life, surrounded by people who claimed to be protecting him while actually preventing him from seeking protection anywhere else. When Priscilla was shown the authenticated letter in 2023, her reaction provided crucial corroboration for Elvis's claims about blocked communications. She confirmed that in the weeks before Elvis's death, she had received a series of strange phone calls to her California home. The calls would come at unusual hours early morning or very late at night, and when she answered, there would be brief periods of silence followed by someone who sounded like Elvis saying cryptic phrases before the line would go dead. She had assumed these were prank calls from Elvis impersonators, especially since Elvis's voice sounded strained and unlike his normal speaking patterns. But reading his letter, she realized those calls had been Elvis trying to communicate with her in ways that wouldn't trigger the monitoring system he described. Priscilla also confirmed something that investigators found particularly significant. During the same period when Elvis was trying to reach her, she had attempted to call Grassland several times to speak with him directly. Each time she was told that Elvis was either sleeping, in meetings, or too ill to take phone calls. The person who took these messages assured her that Elvis would be told she had called and that he would return her calls when he felt better. Elvis never called back. But according to his letter, he never received those messages. The communication blackout between Elvis and Priscilla wasn't accidental, it was being actively maintained by people who had reasons for keeping them apart. The timeline revealed in Elvis's letter shows that his failed escape plan wasn't just about avoiding the people who were controlling him, it was about exposing them. Elvis had written to Priscilla that he planned to fake his death in mid-August 1977, disappear for a period of time, and then surface publicly with evidence of the financial and medical manipulation he had discovered. He believed that faking his death would allow him to escape the legal agreements that kept him trapped, while also providing cover for gathering the proof he needed to expose the conspiracy against him. But Elvis's death occurred exactly when his letter said he planned to stage his fake death. Which means Either his escape plan was tragically successful in ways he never intended, or the people he was trying to escape discovered his plan and decided that a real death would serve their interests better than a fake one. The most chilling evidence of this possibility lies in what happened to the Memphis address Elvis had written on the envelope. When investigators attempted to trace that address, they discovered it belonged to someone who had died in a car accident just 3 days before Elvis's death. Whether that timing was coincidental or calculated remains unclear, but it meant that Elvis's backup plan for getting his letter to Priscilla had been eliminated before he could execute it. He died with his cry for help sealed behind a bathroom wall, his escape route blocked, and his final communication to the person he trusted most buried where no one would find it for 46 years. Elvis's letter was never sent because Elvis never had the chance to send it. And that fact transforms his death from a tragic ending into something far more sinister, the successful completion of a plan that Elvis had discovered but couldn't escape in time. Elvis's hidden letter doesn't just rewrite the story of his final weeks, it fundamentally transforms our understanding of his death from tragic accident to potential homicide. When you examine the timeline Elvis laid out in his letter against what actually happened on August 16, 1977, the coincidences become too precise to dismiss as mere chance. Elvis wrote that he planned to stage his death in mid-August, specifically during a period when his handlers would be expecting him to be in poor health due to his medication schedule. He died on August 16, 1977, exactly when his letter said he intended to fake his death, under circumstances that perfectly matched the scenario he had been planning to orchestrate. The question that haunts every page of his letter is whether Elvis succeeded in his plan to disappear, or whether someone else discovered that plan and decided to make it permanent in ways that served their interests rather than his. The financial motive for Elvis's murder becomes undeniable when you examine the documents he referenced in his letter. Elvis wrote about finding insurance policies and estate planning agreements that made his death enormously profitable for the people managing his affairs. These weren't standard entertainment industry contracts, they were sophisticated financial instruments that created massive payouts upon Elvis's death while providing relatively modest, ongoing compensation during his lifetime. Elvis had inadvertently discovered that Colonel Parker, Dr. Nicopolis, and several other members of his inner circle had structured their relationships with him in ways that made his death worth more to them than his continued living. The letter suggests Elvis planned to expose these arrangements as part of his escape plan, giving his handlers powerful financial incentive to prevent that exposure permanently. But the most damning evidence in Elvis's letter relates to his medical treatment. Elvis described discovering that his prescription medications were being deliberately combined in ways designed not to treat his legitimate medical conditions, but to create and maintain cognitive impairment. He wrote about attempting to reduce his medication intake to clear his head for his escape, only to find that his handlers responded by increasing his dosages and introducing new pharmaceutical combinations that left him more dependent and less capable of independent decision-making. The massive concentrations of prescription drugs found in Elvis's system at the time of his death weren't evidence of Elvis's inability to control his drug intake, they were evidence of other people controlling his drug intake to serve their own purposes. This medical manipulation provides new context for understanding Elvis's autopsy findings that have puzzled independent analysts for decades. The pharmaceutical combinations found in his system were so extreme that they should have killed him hours before he was officially discovered dead. But if Elvis was attempting to reduce his medication to execute his escape plan, and if his handlers discovered this and responded by administering massive emergency doses to prevent his escape, then the timeline of his death suddenly makes perfect sense. Elvis may have died not from accidental overdose, but from deliberate pharmaceutical assassination designed to stop his escape plan before it could be completed. The pattern Elvis documented in his letter reveals institutional practices that continue to operate in the entertainment industry today. The systematic isolation from family and friends, the control over all communication, The creation of financial dependency, the use of medical treatment as a mechanism for behavioral control, these techniques didn't disappear when Elvis died. They were refined, legalized, and institutionalized as standard practices for managing high-value celebrities who generate enormous revenue for the people around them. Elvis's letter provides historical documentation of how these systems function when they escalate to the point where the celebrity becomes more valuable dead than alive. Recent celebrity deaths involving young performers who had expressed concerns about their handlers, their medications, and their loss of personal autonomy echo the patterns Elvis described with terrifying precision. Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, Prince all died under circumstances involving prescription drug combinations administered by medical professionals who had financial relationships with the celebrities' management teams. All had expressed concerns in their final months about losing control over their own lives and medical care. All had begun attempting to assert independence from handlers who had become financially dependent on maintaining control over them. And all died before they could successfully escape the systems that were extracting value from their fame while destroying their capacity to protect themselves. The Presley estate's ongoing legal efforts to suppress Elvis's letter reveal the scope of institutional investment in maintaining the official story. The resources being spent to prevent public access to Elvis's own written words about his final weeks aren't just about protecting privacy, they're about protecting decades of carefully constructed narrative designed to blame Elvis for his own destruction while absolving the people who profited from that destruction. The estate's legal strategy treats Elvis's letter not as historical evidence to be preserved, but as a threat to be contained. Which raises the question, what are they protecting? And why does Elvis's own testimony about his final weeks require such aggressive suppression? For the millions of people who have spent 46 years believing that Elvis died because he couldn't overcome his personal demons, this letter requires a fundamental moral reckoning. Elvis didn't die because he was too weak to handle fame or too addicted to control his behavior. He died because the machinery of fame had evolved into a system of exploitation so sophisticated that escape required faking death, and even that desperate measure was prevented by people who found murder more convenient than freedom. The comfortable narrative that blamed Elvis for his own destruction protected the reputation of his handlers while ensuring that the systems that killed him could continue operating without scrutiny. Elvis's letter forces us to confront what we really mean when we talk about protecting someone's legacy. The official story protects the people who destroyed Elvis by framing his death as personal failure rather than institutional homicide. But Elvis's own words suggest that protecting his real legacy requires confronting the truth about who killed him and why they did it. The letter asks whether we loved Elvis enough to handle the truth about how celebrity exploitation killed him, or whether we preferred the lie that he killed himself because it was easier than confronting the systems that made his murder profitable. The letter Elvis never intended anyone to find reveals that his death wasn't a conclusion, it was an accusation. An accusation that has waited 46 years to be heard, sealed behind a bathroom wall in the house where he died. Written in desperate handwriting by a man who knew he was running out of time to save himself. Elvis's final written words weren't a goodbye, they were evidence. Evidence that the king of rock and roll was murdered by the people he trusted most, for reasons that had nothing to do with music and everything to do with money. What makes this revelation particularly devastating is its implication for every other celebrity death that has followed the same pattern. If Elvis Presley could be systematically isolated, medically controlled, and ultimately killed by his own handlers without any institutional accountability, then the entertainment industry operates as a legalized assassination network, where fame becomes a death sentence, and the people claiming to protect celebrities are actually positioning themselves to profit from their deaths. Elvis's hidden letter transforms his death from personal tragedy into institutional crime. And the fact that it took 46 years for this evidence to surface reveals how successfully those institutions have operated to suppress the truth about what they do to the people who make them rich. Elvis's final message to Priscilla wasn't just a cry for help, it was a witness statement. And now, finally, someone is listening to what the witness had to say. If Elvis's hidden letter to Priscilla has shattered everything you thought you knew about his death good, some truths are worth the shattering. Subscribe now for more suppressed celebrity revelations the industry doesn't want exposed. Hit the bell, share your thoughts below, and tell someone who deserves to know this story.